the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Algeria, the final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We're back to part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections of Algeria. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad, and that was based mostly on their participation over usually the past 2 years. Since the previous African Cup in the case of Algeria, and but we did consider a few other factors as well. We actually ran out of time to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going back to review that to complete the collection, as it were. The tournament has been played by this point, but we're going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the media cast when we intended to. So this mediacast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at the games in November and January, just prior to the tournament. In Section 2, it's the main part of the mediacast, so a review of the preliminary and final roster that was released, which we'll compare to the list that we compiled in Part 1. And in Section 3, we will summarize by reviewing surprise selections and non-selections, new players, and updating on injuries. And then we'll end with a revised version of our Spotlight review, our predictions of who we think are going to be starters. Okay, let's jump right in. So Section 1, just a little information about the teams. I got to fix up my graphics here. So the squad, well, Algeria picked 26 players. They were actually allowed to bring 27. Initially, it was 23, but a decision in mid-December raised it to 27 players. However, Algeria seemed satisfied with 26. However, they did choose a 50-man preliminary squad, and so that means they would have to cut 24 to create the final squad. So we'll look at that preliminary squad. Let's talk a little bit about the games that were played. So 2 World Cup qualifiers in November. We're going to look at the lineups for those. The first one was against Somalia, and the second was against Mozambique. Again, World Cup qualifying games there. We're not really interested in the results, truth be told. Well, we are in our other podcast, but not in the player media cast here. We're focused on the lineups. Also, they had 2 pre-tournament friendlies in January. One was against Togo. That was a non-FIFA friendly. And initially I thought maybe it's not even the senior team, but it was the senior team playing. However, for that and the other one, we don't have great information. So we'll just have to make do with what we've got. So 2 January friendlies, pre-tournament warm-up games there against Togo and against Burundi. Okay, that is it for Section 1. We are ready to move on to the main part of the mediacast here. A look at the candidates, and we'll see how we did in predicting the candidates. So let's begin with the manager, Jamal Belmadi, and he has not been changed prior to the tournament, so we will call him a selection, as it were. And again, if you want to get more information on these players, we have more information on them in Part 1, on the manager and on the players. Here we're just kind of reviewing what we got. So what we got for goalkeepers is a definite candidate in Anthony Mandrea from Part 1. We also had a likely candidate in Mustafa Zegba. A possible candidate in Usama Ben Bout, and then we had a possible but likely candidate, Alexander Ukija, and finally, seemingly off the squad, Reis Mboli. So we did keep some of those names from our possible but unlikely category and seemingly off the squad category. We usually had a reason for doing that in part one. Those reasons may be lost to me. But we also do in the soccer files have quite a few more names in these sections, but we're only going to bring up the ones that kind of come into play. So we may be introducing some of the ones if they happen to come out of the wilderness, as it were. Okay, let's see how they did then. We have Anthony Mandrea, our definite candidate, was selected for the final squad. Mustafa Zegba, our likely candidate, selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So a bit of a surprise there, but there is more to say on that in section 3. The possible candidate, Usama Benbout, was selected for the final squad. Possible but unlikely, Alexander Ukija, not even selected for that 50-man preliminary squad. However, another surprise in that Reis Mboli, who is seemingly off the squad, was selected not only for the preliminary but for the final squad. He last appeared for the team in November 2022, and at 37 years old, we presumed that he was retired from international play, but here he is selected for the final team. I'm curious to see if he will get on. We also have 2 new candidates as goalies. We are just going to list them because they only made the preliminary squad, but they may come into play down the road. So let's put their names on the list, but we won't introduce them beyond that. So the first one is Teddy Bulhendi, and the other is Gaia Murba. So neither of those have any caps for the national team, at least for the senior national team. Murba has played in the African Nations Championship, but we consider that more like a secondary or B team. Okay, so there we have it. We have Anthony Mandrea, Usama Benbout, and Reis Mboli as our successful candidates for the final squad. But as I said, a bit more to say about the likely candidate, Mustafa Zegba. There, let's take a look at the recent games and see who started. So in the 2 November games, we had Mandrea starting the first one and the second one. So both of those World Cup qualifiers, Mandrea was the starter. And again, it's a little bit hard to tell with the information I have. In fact, I'm not even sure I have a goalkeeper listed in the starting lineup here. No, it is Mandrea in the game against Togo, and also Mandrea in the game against Burundi. So it seems quite clear. I think we had predicted him as the starter. We'll get to that in the spotlight review in section 3, but definitely looking like the starter here. All right, on we go to central defenders. And we begin with a definite candidate in Aissa Mandi. 2 likely candidates, Ahmed Touba and Mohamed Amin Tougué. No categories in the possible, but one in the possible but unlikely, Ayumu Seko. And then we had 3 candidates in the seemingly off the squad. We won't name them unless they come into play here. So let's see who made it. Usually teams bring 5 or 6, so that's perhaps why we listed so many there, because it's really surprising that they only have 3 candidates at the possible level or above. So here we go. Aissa Mandi, the definite candidate, was selected for the final squad. Ahmed Touba, the first of our likely candidate, also selected, and so was Mohamed Amin Tougué. So no surprise that all 3 of those were selected. Almost a surprise, in fact, that Ayumu Seko wasn't selected, at least for the preliminary squad, but he didn't even make the preliminary squad. However, a couple of our players in the seemingly off the squad did make it, so I'll just mention them by name. Abdelkader Bedrain, just making it to the preliminary squad, and Jamal Ben Larmi, also making it to the preliminary squad. And we do have 1 new candidate here, and in fact the new candidate made it to the final squad. So we're going to introduce him here. It's Zinedine Belaid. Zinedine Belaid. So let's take a look at him because we didn't have him on our list in part one. So he is 25 years old and has 8 caps for Algeria since 2023. So he got his first cap in January of 2023 and started 6 of their remaining games prior to the tournament. He was subbed in for 1, on the bench for 2, and not selected for 8 matches. However, we should say that 6 of his caps were in the African Nations Championship in January of 2023. And I think that's why he wasn't on our list. Normally he would be if he was playing in January 2023, but we didn't pay particular attention to the African Nations Championship because a lot of those squad members don't make it to the A team, as it were. But this one did, Zinedine Belaid, and selected for the final squad. So in summary, we only have 4 central defenders: Aissa Mandi, Ahmed Touba, Mohamed Amin Tougué, and Zinedine Belaid. So still less than is traditionally brought. But we did see in part 1 that a couple of out of position players sometimes come back and play in the central midfield. So in fact, in the first game in November, we do have Mohamed Amin Tougué paired alongside Zerouki. Just going to see where he is on our list. So Zerouki is a central midfielder. So there we have him playing out of position. And I'm sure we're going to see that, given that they've only brought 4 candidates. In the second game of November, it was Aissa Mandi, who we kind of expect to be a starter, and he's playing alongside Ben Sebaini. So also Ben Sebaini, not a central defender by trade, but rather a left back. But he secondarily is a central defender. So there again, we're likely going to see players playing out of position there. Sorry, I just got to get back to my spot. Okay, so there we go. In the first game against Togo, I am seeing Ben Sebaini again, but I'm not really sure if he is starting as a central defender there because I don't kind of have an image of the lineup. And Aissa Mandi again. So if Ben Sebaini, who scored 2 goals in the game, I might add, perhaps that was the pairing again there. In the Burundi game, we do see that pairing, Ben Sebaini and Mandi. So that gives us a bit of confidence that Ben Sebaini will come in as a central defender in this tournament. We're about to meet him as we move on to left backs here. But there we have it. Let's meet him right away because we're talking about him anyway. Okay, on to left backs. We had Rami Ben Sebaini as a definite candidate here at left back, but then we had no candidates at the likely level, but 2 at the possible level: Ryan Aït-Nouri and Yasser Larouchi. And all 3 of those were selected, to make a long story short. So definite candidate Rami Ben Sebaini. Again, looks like he's going to be a central defender in this tournament. So that leaves the position of left back maybe open for Ryan Aït-Nouri or Yasser Larouchi. And it is a bit unusual that they bring 3 left backs, so it definitely seems the plan that Ben Sebaini is a central defender here. We do have a new candidate as a left back. In fact, 2 of them, both of them making the preliminary squad. The first one is not actually a new candidate, but kind of coming in out of the cold. I had to dig him out from our files, and it is Fawzi Ghulam. And he was a starter in the past, 4 tournaments, the 2013, 15, and 17 African Cups. He was on that squad, as well as the World Cup squad, as a starter in most of those, but hasn't appeared for the national team since September 2017. And here he is named to the preliminary squad. So that was a bit unusual. The next one is Jaoun Hadjam, and he is a new player. But we won't go into detail because he only made the preliminary squad. So there, in summary, we have Rami Bentabeni probably playing as a central defender, and we may see as starters either Ryan Aitnouri or Yasser Larouci, both of those having been possible candidates. Let's take a look and see who did play the position. So in the first World Cup qualifier against Somalia, it was Larouci back in November, and in the second one it was Aitnouri. So it looks like they're kind of vying for the position, for the starting position there, and just trying to figure out. It looks like it was Aitnouri against Togo, and Aitnouri again against Burundi. So Aitnouri seems to be winning that battle and is possibly a starter at left back here. Over to the right back, we have no definite candidates, but two likely ones. The first one is Yusuf Attal, and the second one is Kevin van den Kerkhoff. I have since learned, since part one, that his Algerian name is Kevin Guitouri, but I'm still seeing Van den Kerkhoff used. So we'll have to see in the tournament which one he seems to go by. But you may see Kevin Guitouri, and that will be the same person as Kevin van den Kerkhoff. We had no players at the possible or possible unlikely level, and for some reason we did have a seemingly off the squad Hussein Benayada. So let's see how these players fared in terms of selection. Yusuf Attal, our first likely candidate, was selected, as was Kevin van den Kerkhoff, or Kevin Guitouri, if you like. The seemingly off the squad player, Hussein Benayada, not even selected for the preliminary squad there. But just a moment, please. But we did have another player seemingly off the squad on our list, and he made it to the preliminary squad. That is Mehdi Zafani, or Mehdi Zafane, making it to the preliminary squad there. So we thought he was out of the picture, but he was at least in the picture enough to be named to the preliminary squad. So in summary, two right backs here. That's the usual number, Yusuf Attal and Kevin van den Kerkhoff. And let's see who started in the November games. It was Attal starting both games against Togo, also Yusuf Attal, and also in the game against Burundi. So he seems to have a firm grip on the position, and Van den Kerkhoff seems more like a backup player there. Okay, that is it for defense. So we move on to midfield, and we'll look at defensive midfielders first. And really, we didn't have much in the way of candidates here, none at the definite, likely, possible, or even the possible but unlikely. We just had Sofiane Bendepka seemingly off the squad, and then we noted that Adeline Guediura was retired, or at least we had him in the retired category. Neither of those selected even for the preliminary squad, but we do have a new candidate only making it to the preliminary squad, but we'll mention the name for future reference, and that is Victor Lecal. Victor Lecal, possibly a candidate in the future. We won't look at the lineups until we cover central midfielders here, because they often overlap. So let's go to that. We had no definite candidates here either. However, we did have three likely candidates. The first one was Ismail Ben Nasser. Secondly, Ramiz Zarouki. And thirdly, Hussein Aouar. And all three of those made it to the preliminary squad. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry, we do have a possible candidate. I'm kind of giving away the mystery. A possible candidate in Adam Zorgane or Zorgane. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And then a possible but unlikely candidate, Haris Belkebla. His career has not gone well since he showed his butt on camera in a social media post. Let's see. Now we'll see how the candidates did. So I gave it away, but our three likely candidates: Ismail Benacer, selected for the final squad. Ramiz Zarouki also will be on the team, and Hussein Aouar also selected for the final squad. The possible candidate, Adam Zorgane, made it to the preliminary squad, but not the final cut there. And possible but unlikely candidate, Haris Belkebla, not selected even for the preliminary squad. Okay, now we can check the games and see who made it. So in the first game against Somalia, it was a 4-4-2 formation. So we have two central midfielders. And the first one is Chaibi, who we're going to meet soon. I think he's coded as a left winger. Anyway, we'll meet him. So again, another out of position player, and playing alongside Mandy, who we met as a central defender. So both of those out of position players playing there. However, we do have one of our candidates on the list, Hussein Aouar, playing as a right winger in that 4-4-2 formation. So he is a bit out of position there too. So over to Algeria, and this time it is a 4-3-3 formation, and we have our likely candidate Bentaleb in the middle, and he is flanked by more attacking players who I'll mention a bit later, Gouiri and Fegouli, but we'll talk about those. And that's it. So a lot of these players not being used, frankly, they seem a bit weak in the central midfield because we're seeing out of position players. And again, the number of players, just three selections here, is a bit thin for this position, defensive and central midfielders. So here, as in central defense, we'll probably be seeing out of position players coming in, as we did with the 2 November games. In the game against Togo, the first of the January friendlies, we see Benacer, and I'm just going to mention the names of the players on our list here. Benacer did get a start, but beyond him, none of the central or defensive midfielders. And in the game against Burundi, I'm seeing a 4-3-3 formation. But again, out of position players, Bentaleb, Chaibi, and here too we do see Benacer. So he seems the most likely among these players to start, even though we only have 3 of them. Only Benacer seems to be starting in any but more than one game. Okay, let's move on upfield, and we had no players coded as left midfielders, but we had 3 players on our right midfielder list, and we noted in part 1 that the first of them, no definite candidate, but a likely candidate, Sofiane Fegouli, can be found anywhere on the field, so he moves around quite a bit. Anyway, it's Sofiane Fegouli, and then 2 possible candidates in Hikam Boudaoui and Haytham Lusif. And let's see how that turned out. So Sofiane Fegouli was selected for the final squad. The first of the possible candidates, Hikam Boudaoui, also selected. Haytham Lusif just selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. So we could count those 2 players, I suppose, among central midfielders, and kind of that increases the number of central midfielders. And as we did see we did see Soufiane Fougouli starting as a left midfielder in the second November game. And I'm just looking to see if Boudaoui got a start, but I don't see that he did. In fact, Soufiane Fougouli did start against Togo, but it looks like he started as a forward. As I said, he moves around, but we're not dead sure what position he started in. And then we don't see him or Boudaoui on the field against Burundi in the second friendly there. So none of those players really look like players that we can predict as starters. Let's move to the upper left quadrant of the field. Often these players are coded as left wingers, but they might play as left attacking midfielders or left forwards in a 4-3-3 formation. We had no definite candidates here either, but we did have a likely candidate in Faris Chaibi, who we've met already playing as a central midfielder in the first November game there. We also have two possible candidates. The first one, Youssef Belaili, and the second one, Saïd Ben Rama. And then for some reason we had a seemingly off the squad player, Rashid Ghezal on our list as well, seemingly off the squad. Let's see how it turned out. Faris Chaibi was selected, the likely candidate. The first of the possible candidates, Youssef Belaili, was selected, but Saïd Ben Rama was not. Just selected for the preliminary squad was Saïd Ben Rama, and so too Rashid Ghezal. Despite being seemingly off the squad, he did at least make the preliminary squad, so is in Algeria's picture still somewhat, but seems to be on the way out. Okay, so two candidates there. Let's look at the games. Again, a 4-4-2 in the first friendly, and it was it was the forward Buneja playing as a left winger. That's a bit odd. In the first game. In the second game, a 4-3-3, we have Gouiri. We're going to meet these guys soon. They're all forwards, but we do have Chaibi playing as a left forward. Gouiri playing as a left midfielder behind Chaibi as a left forward. So Chaibi getting some starts. Again, we saw him as a central midfielder in game one. So we're not sure where he's going to start, but he does seem to be starting. I'm looking for the names of these players on the list against Togo, but I don't see any of these guys. But against Burundi, we do have Chaibi as a left midfielder, and then we have Belaili as a left forward in the 4-3-3 formation. So Chaibi starting 3 of the games there. Am I right? Yes, 3 of the games in different positions: central midfield, left forward, and then left midfield. So he moves around quite a bit too. So those are our left wingers, Faris Chaibi and Youssef Belaili. And we move over to the right upper quadrant of the field. No, we have a bit of business to do because we have 2 candidates just to mention as new candidates making the preliminary squad. So Bilal Brahimi is the first of those, and Farid El Malali the second. Again, just the preliminary squad here, and perhaps we'll see them down the road. Okay, now we're ready to go over to the right wing, where we had a definite candidate in Riyad Mahrez, and we had no candidates at the likely level, but we had Badruddin Bouanani as a possible candidate, and then 2 possible but unlikely candidates. I won't mention their name too, but their name right here, because I'll be mentioning them right away. In fact, only one of these 4 players made it to the squad, and that is Riyad Mahrez, and also captain of the team. as he was back in 2019 and 2021. Riyad Mahrez selected. However, the possible candidate, Badruddin Bouanani, only selected for the preliminary squad there. And then the two possible but unlikely candidates that at least did make the preliminary squad were Mehdi Leris and Bachir Obakir Baloumi. So again, players that are still somewhat in the picture and may come up in the 2025 African Cup, which takes place in December 2025. Okay, well, we are coding attacking midfielders as forwards. We'll probably change that the next time we do a series. But for attacking midfielders, we have no definite or likely candidates, but we have a possible candidate in Abdelkader Kadri, a possible but unlikely candidate in Himad Abdelli, and a seemingly off-the-squad player in veteran Yassine Brahimi. And all three of those made it to the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So Abdelkader Kadri, Himad Abdelli, and Yassine Brahimi just making it to that 50-man preliminary squad, but we won't see them in the cup. And yes, you can see in the formations, the 4-4-2 and the 4-3-3, that that position doesn't have an attacking midfielder. So if they use a formation that has one, it'll be an out-of-position player. I should also mention that we have a new candidate here, also in Amir Sayoud, and he too just made the preliminary squad, Amir Sayoud. But I do have a good story about him, so let's pause and take a look at Amir Sayoud. He got his first two caps in local tournament play in 2019, so that would be the African Nations Championship. And he was playing in Algeria at that time. He's since moved to Saudi Arabia, but he had his moment in the sun, last appearing for the national team in the 2021 FIFA Arab Cup, where he was subbed in and scored the winning goal in extra time of the final. However, that did not seem to help him that much in terms of making it onto the team. So what glory there. They won that 2021, well, Arab Cup, but it's now called the FIFA Arab Cup. So that kind of raises its status, despite scoring the winning goal. Was not called up to the national team afterwards. But again, he is on the preliminary squad here. So looks like he's still in consideration to a degree. Anyway, no secondary strikers for us to look at here, so we end with forwards. And here too, we had no definite candidates, but we do have four likely candidates. The first one, Baghdad Bouneja, then Islam Slimani, then Mohamed Amoura, and the fourth one, Amin Ghouri, who is actually coded as a left winger, but we moved him up to forward. During part one of the podcast. We may have to reconsider that because we're seeing him start all over the field here. But anyway, here he is as one of our likely forwards. We have a possible candidate in Adam Unas, and then two possible but unlikely on our list, Andy Delort and Ayman Mahuis. So let's see who made it. Islam Slimani, I'll start with Baghdad Bouneja, was selected for the final squad. Islam Slimani also selected. The third candidate, Mohamed Amoura, selected, and so was Amin Ghouri. So I could have summarized by saying all were selected, but we do have a bit more to say about Amin Ghouri in part three. For the possible candidate there, Adam Unas, he also made it to the squad. So they're investing a lot of their resources in the front line here. So we saw a bit thin in central defense and central midfield. Andy Delort, the possible but unlikely candidate, made it to the preliminary squad, but not the final selection. And Ayman Mahuis, the same thing, not selected there. And no new candidates up here. So it just leaves us to look at the recent games, but I do realize now that I forgot to look at the right attacking midfield position. It'll probably be Mahrez, but let's take a look. So in game one against Somalia, actually we did see that it was Aouar, the central midfielder, Aouar, playing as a left winger, or sorry, a right winger in the 4-2-2. But we do see Mahrez here playing as a co-forward, but on the left side. So he also moving around, and we have Gouiri partnering him, playing as the right co-forward there. In the second game against Mozambique, we see Mahrez in his usual right attacking midfield position, or a right forward in this 4-3-3 formation, and Slimani as the centre forward. And we already noted that Faris Chaibi was the left forward. In against Togo, we don't have the actual picture, but we do see that Mahrez and Slimani both started in that game. And I speculated that Feghouli may have been playing as a forward there, but we're not really sure. Against Burundi, we have Buneja coming back. That is familiar from the 2021 squad and prior. Buneja playing as a centre forward, Mahrez playing as the right attacking midfielder, and in this case, Belali playing as the left forward in the 4-3-3 formation. So again, as is the case in a lot of positions with Algeria, kind of tough to nail down starters with different players kind of coming in and out to start. Anyway, that concludes section 2, the players that were selected. So I'll just summarize forwards one more time. So 5 forwards being brought to the Cup: Baghdad Buneja, Islam Slimani, Mohamed Amoura, and Amin Gouiri, and also Adam Unas. Okay, we move on to part 3, and we do have a couple of things to say, a couple of updates on that. Gouiri is one of them, because he withdrew from the squad, so due to injury. So we're actually just going to pop down to the dropped due to injury list and put Amin Gouiri on that list. So we won't see him at the Cup after all. He had been a likely candidate. And strangely, they replaced him with a goalkeeper. So they're going to bring 4 goalkeepers to the Cup, 4 of the 26 players. Really odd to me that they did that instead of adding an attacker or even adding a 27th player. They add a 4th goalkeeper. It is Mustafa Zegba, who we had as a notable non-selection, but then he was recalled to the squad, and so we won't have him as a notable non-selection. He was really the only player at the likely or definite level that didn't make it to the squad. But we did have a surprise inclusion with Race Mboli, so we had him as seemingly off the squad. Last played for the team in November 2022, but here he is making it to the final squad. And then new players, just the one, the central defender Zinedine Belaid, making it to the final squad. So just one player there. And I thought we had more injury updates to talk about at the end of part 1, but it actually, there were none to talk about. Amin Gouiri actually, just before the tournament there, 2 days after they selected the final squad, which he was on, was removed from the squad due to the knee injury. So he's the only injury that we had to talk about. So let's go to our spotlight review and review the players that we predicted in part 1, and revise it according to the our thoughts for part 2, based mostly on what we've seen over the November and January games. So Jamal Belmadi we had as a starter, so it were, or as it were, the manager, Jamal Belmadi. So no change in our opinion on that. We think he will be leading them through the cup. For goalkeeper, we had perhaps a rotation or one or the other of Anthony Mandrea and Mustafa Zegba. We were taken by surprise that Zegba was not initially selected for the tournament. So now we doubt he'll be a starter, and the evidence suggests that Anthony Mandrea will be the starter, having started all 4 of those November and January games. In central defence, we also weren't really sure. So we had Mandy, Touge, and Benzabeni. So we did know in section or in part 1 that Benzabeni was playing as a central defender. But now we can revise this. We now think it will be Mandy and Benzabeni. We do have it in green, which suggests high confidence, but I would say somewhere between blue and green there. We're not fully confident, but we'll put it in green anyway. For left back, well, we thought Benzabeni may start as left back. Otherwise, all of the candidates, in our opinion, seem to have an equal chance, so we weren't sure. However, with the new information, we think Benzabeni will be in central defence, and Ait Nouri will be the starting left back there. On the right, again, here too, we had maybe a rotation, or we weren't dead sure whether it would be Atal or Vanden Kerkhoff, but now we think it will be Yusuf Atal. So actually we're getting a lot of green here, although we're not as confident as that green suggests. For central midfield, we really didn't put any names down. But we have grown in confidence a little bit that Nabil Bentaleb will be a starter in the central midfield. We saw they used a lot of out of position players. One of them was a player we have coded as a left attacking midfield, Faris Chaibi. But if he doesn't start in central midfield, we do think he'll probably be starting somewhere, perhaps on the left wing. And in fact, that's where we had him, as a left winger or left attacking midfielder. But here now we've seen that he's starting in various places. We think the midfield is more likely. So Faris Chaibi, we move to central midfield and remove him from left wing. We also had Saeed Ben Rama as a possibility over here, but he wasn't selected for the final squad. So now we're not really sure what we're going to see on the left wing. We saw forward Buneja starting there once, and basically various players starting over there, Baleli as well. But so we don't have enough confidence in any particular player that we expect to see there. On the right wing, though, a completely different story. Riyad Mahrez. He might not necessarily start as a right winger, but in part 1 we had him as a definite candidate here, and we're sticking with it. Central attacking midfield, they don't really use the position, so we're not putting anyone there. For forwards, we were more confident in Islam Slimani as a starting forward at the end of part 1. But given what we've seen here, we now think it's going to be either Slimani or Buneja. I, for some reason, think it's going to be Buneja, but he really hasn't started that much over the last 2 years. So there's not a lot of logic behind it, just a feeling. So we'll say it's fairly even between Slimani and Buneja, and we'll see how wrong we are, because we actually do get to look at the first game. So we're going to add kind of as a special treat, because we can, what the actual lineup was in the first game. So let's see what actually happened. Well, we'll call Jamal Belmadi a starter, because he is the manager, the game 1 at least. Goalkeeper Anthony Mandrea is the starter here, so that's what we expected. Central defence, we had Aissa Mandi and Rami Benzabeni. Well, a bit strange on the... I'm using actually the TV lineup here. And they had, well, I'll get into it in a second once I introduce the whole defense. But anyway, we'll say that Mandy and Ben Sabine are the starting central defenders. Ait Nouri is the starting left back, and Yusuf Attal is the starting right back. I think that is true, but the TV lineup has Yusuf Attal as the centre back and Aissa Mandy as the right back. So I kind of think that they made a mistake there, which they sometimes do. But I have no way of kind of checking that. So I'm just going to go with the standard there, and things are going very much as predicted so far. In the central midfield, we do have Nabil Bentaleb starting alongside Faris Chaibi. So it looks like Chaibi more of a central midfielder at this point. That opens up the left wing, where we didn't have anyone actually. We didn't have anyone listed there. But perhaps we should have had Youssef Belaili at least as a possible candidate, because he did start the last game against Burundi in this position. By the way, it looks like a 4-3-3 on TV, so this would be a left forward position. So not a great shock there, but you know, after part one, we had noted that he hadn't started any of the last eight matches. So that is, from a longer term perspective, a bit of a surprise there. Certainly not a surprise that Riyad Mahrez is a starter on the right forward position in that 4-3-3. And my feeling was right, actually, that Baghdad Bouneja would be the starter. And that turns out to be the case. So Bouneja, the starter, but I'm sure we'll see Slimani subbing in. So not bad. Our predictions fairly on the fairly good there, considering that we were quite uncertain after part one. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our look at Algeria's selections, and we will see you in 2025, not too long from now, when we take a look probably at Algeria again. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.